Tony Hody Training and Consulting presents the Crash Course Podcast. Sponsored by Engage, Builder Prime, and Hiring Strategies. Your weekly destination for coaching, inspiration, and new skills to help you maximize your income and success in the home improvement sales industry. Here are your hosts, sales and training experts, Phil Wiley and TJ Parsons.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Crash Course. My name is TJ Parsons and I'm joined by Phil Wiley. And today we are very honored to have a special guest here, the CEO of Level 10 Contractor, Rich Harshaw. Rich, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me, y'all.
Phil, how are you today?
I'm awesome, TJ, and looking forward to spending some time with Rich today. So, Rich, let's start out right off the top and ask you to tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm a marketing guy through and through. I've been in business 30 years this year, gone through a couple of different iterations of what I do. The shortest version of that story is that 2005, I got heavily involved in the remodeling industry through a relationship with a gentleman I think everybody knows, Tim Mush. And he called me up one day. I was not in this industry, and he said, hey, I'm doing what they called in those days a teleseminar. Webinar is what we call it now. And I'm going to have about 300 contractors. Do you want to come and do a presentation? And I said, yeah, what the heck? And I did, and it went well. And afterwards I was talking to Tim and I said, hey, who's the marketing guru in this industry? Remember, this is 2005. Right. And he said, well, there really isn't one. That's why I called you to come on this contractor podcast, or excuse me, webinar. So yeah, started doing some stuff with those guys. I think we did like 30 different seminars, live seminars in about 2 years. And this is what we do now. We're strictly in this industry, remodeling. We do some home services stuff. And our forte now is we build websites, we do SEO, and we're also heavily involved in advertising, radio, television, digital.
Something that you covered a lot in your most recent seminar that you had on YouTube was platitudes that are found in home sales. Can you talk about some of the common platitudes that you run into when looking over companies' sales presentations?
Yeah, this is kind of the keystone of everything that we do over here at Level 10 Contractor. It's getting rid of platitudes and replacing them with something that we call identity. So a platitude are words and phrases that are drearily commonplace, that lack power to evoke interest because they're just super commonplace. It would be saying things like, we've got the best service, we've been in business since 1431 BC, lowest prices. And people hear that stuff and like anybody can say it. Can you back it up? The biggest company in this industry can say that. So can the Chuck in the truck. So, what we're looking to do is find ways to say things that are a lot more specific, a lot more what we call power, precision, and passion. Okay. So that's the opposite of the platitude would be identity.
Well, you talked a lot about identity on one of the webinars that I watched of yours recently. Explain to us in from a sales presentation standpoint what we would look at as our definition of identity and why that's so important in our presentations.
Yeah, I think the quickest way to make the connection would be sort of like the company story. Okay, so you're going to a sales presentation, you're going to do the warm up, and usually, tell me if I'm wrong, you're the expert on sales, not me. I'm the marketing guy, but the company story comes within the first third at least of the presentation. Is that typically true?
Yes,
correct.
Yeah, so in my world, which is a marketing world, we want to take this identity, which is communicating who you are, how you're different, why you're better, what people can expect when they do business with you. We want to broadcast that out there in advertising, radio, television, on your website. Your SEO is going to be heavily involved with identity. So that's my world. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that when people show up to the sales meeting, that they already have a pretty good idea of the advantages of doing business with you, so that it's not just strictly waiting for that sales meeting. Now, once you get into the sales meeting, we want to continue that line of thought, and we want to make sure that the conversation, again, here's the big three: power, precision, and passion. Who you are, how you're different, why you're better, what people can expect when they do business with you. It's kind of like building a case, like a jury.
Yeah. Would you say a good example of that would be, like you said, a platitude would be saying something like, we have the best service in the industry, where using identity to talk about your service would be, we have a guaranteed 24-hour return visit service department, where if you call in and you need service, we'll be there within 24 hours to take care of the problem. Is that more of an identity versus just a platitude?
That is correct. But I would even take it further. It starts to get into storytelling, because people are going to connect with stories. So let me give you an example. And I'm going to give you an example of how I would say something on a radio ad. And then I'm going to tell you how I could use that same concept in in-home sales. Okay. So on a radio ad, here's what I might say. And this is an ad I wrote a few years ago for one of my clients called Jericho. It's a kitchen and bathroom modeling company in Kansas City. So I'm paraphrasing. Okay. I'm not reading the script right now, but it says something like this. When it comes to kitchen remodeling, everybody wants to know, how much does it cost? But what you really should be asking is, how much does it weigh? How much does it weigh? Well, when it comes to kitchen faucets, for example, we only use American-made Moen faucets. They're made out of whatever the metal it is, and they weigh about 10 pounds. They look beautiful, and they're going to last for life. Other kitchen remodeling companies, they're going to use imported, cheaper plastic faucets. They weigh about 1.5 pounds. What would you rather have, a 10-pound or 1.5 pounds? Okay, so in that environment, somebody's listening on the radio, they hear that, and without saying, hey, we have high quality materials, we're helping them understand that we have high quality materials. Also notice what we're doing, Phil, TJ, we're price conditioning. We're price conditioning. We're going to probably be more expensive if we have this. Okay. So we're trying to get people to understand this before they ever come into the sales meeting. But of course, not everybody hears the ad. Not everybody sees it on the website. So now when you walk into the sales meeting, how fun would this be? Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, just want you to know, one of the things that really sets us apart is in our kitchen remodeling, we're a high-end company. We only use the highest end materials because we want it to not only look beautiful, we want it to last forever. For example, and now here's what I do. I lean over into my little bag of tricks. This is an example of the kind of faucet. Now, don't worry about the style. We've got access to hundreds of different styles, but look at this. Here, feel this, Mrs. Johnson. You see how heavy that is? It's a Moen faucet. It weighs about 10 pounds. It's high quality. Look, see how beautiful it is? Now, here, let me show you what a lot of our competitors use. Pull this out of my bag. This is a faucet that a lot of our competitors use. Weighs about 1.5 pounds, probably made in China. I just want you to understand there's a difference in quality. This is only emblematic of what we do. Obviously, there's lots of other things. We'll talk about those as we go through this. Okay, so there's me very dramatically telling a story. I would probably do that.
Awesome.
Let me give you another example. This goes back to the 90s. Before I worked in this industry, I had a very large client in this industry, among many clients that were in many industries back in those days. But it was a client called Lawn Smith Roofing. They were a $50 million roofing company in Fort Worth, Texas, back in the 90s. So 50 million then is, who knows how big that is now, right? Yeah. And one of the things that we trained them to do is they said, hey, we've been in business for 30 years. Okay, great. How many clients have you had in 30 years? And it was some large number. It was multiple tens of thousands or something like that. And I said, okay. So if I walk into somebody's house and say, we've been in business for 30 years and we've done, I'll just make up a number. Let's say it was 20,000 clients or 40,000 clients. We've done 40,000 roofs. Okay, that sounds like big numbers, but here's what we coached them to do. Again, remember the time. This was the 90s, 1996 to be specific. In their office, they had this big old frickin' green bar paper. Remember that stuff that would print on the dot matrix printer? And every month they would add that month's customers to this giant 7-inch tall binded thing of all of the customers from day one all the way to day present. And you could see at the bottom, it was all worn and it was, kind of dirty because it's been used for 30 years. And at the top, it was cleaner and greener. We said, print that sucker out for every single salespeople. Have them walk into the house, and we tested this with coffee tables and with kitchen tables, and it was about 8 inches is how high you want to hold it. You don't want to go too much higher because it was too heavy. You say, here's every customer we've ever had. Drop it on their coffee table. You're welcome to call any of them. And they go, whoa. Identity, telling the story, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's a big pillar of what we teach them. What we try to work with companies on is making your company's story the focal point of your presentation, trying to differentiate yourself. So that's amazing. Something that you also go over that we're not familiar with, but we'd love for you to educate us on and talk to our audience about is the trust pyramid.
Okay. So the trust pyramid, it has 5 levels. It's really a trust triangle, if I'm being super honest, but we call
pyramid
it
sounds better.
It sounds cooler. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's got 5 levels. Okay. The bottom level says identity points. Okay. And I'll circle back to this and go in more detail. The second level right above that says stories, examples, and comparisons. The third level says social proof. And then above that is evidence. And then at the very top, the tiniest triangle at the very top of this pyramid says PE, stands for personal experience. Okay. Now you guys as a sales training organization might look at that and go, hey, I don't really like that PE, personal experience, is this little teeny one. Well, it's the most important one. What we're trying to do is make sure that everything that we say from a marketing standpoint, radio, television, advertising, magazines, websites, etc., that it's telling this identity story so that when you're sitting in the home, there's already a consistency of messaging and a consistency of, here's a good word for you, expectations, so that everything's consistent. Now, if you go back to the bottom of the pyramid, identity points, okay, identity points are going to be really just a bullet point of what your identity is based on. And then we want to find the next level up, the stories, examples, and comparisons. So there might be an identity point, quality materials. Remember the kitchen remodeling company? Okay. Well, if I just say, hey, we have high quality materials, guess what I just said? It's a platitude.
Yep.
Okay. So I've got to go to the next level, which is stories, examples, and comparisons. And I just gave you that example of that story. Above that is social proof. Okay. So social proof, how do you control the social proof? Well, this is where I know you guys are involved in brand ambassador program over there at Tony Holding. I've worked with you. I've had many of my clients have used you guys for brand ambassador training. So what if you had your brand ambassador that knew what the identity points were that your company was built on, and you went and you sat down, your brand ambassador now sits down with the client afterwards and says, hey, you know, some of the things that we're known for over here at Window Depot of wherever you guys are, I've forgotten.
It's Cleveland.
You know, one of the things is we have no high sales pressure. We don't exert high sales pressure. Also, we use only the highest quality materials. Also, you know, we have the best warranties. Do any of those 3 things kind of pop out to you as something that you experienced and had a great experience with us over here at Window Depot? And they go, oh yeah, you know, the quality of the materials is really high. Okay, tell me about that. Oh, well, X, Y, and Z. The customer tells you a story. Hey, I'd like you to write a review for us, because this is what the brand ambassador is doing anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
How would you tell that story or talk about that a little bit in this online review, this Google review? So now we've got Google reviews that are backing up what we're promoting as our identity points. So now people are going to see that from the marketing standpoint. When you come into the home, they're going to see that you're going to be talking about this, and they're already going to have seen that identity point in the reviews that they're reading. This is why at the very top of that pyramid, PE, personal experience, all of these things work together. Here's what we're really trying to do, trying to make your sales job 10 times easier.
Absolutely.
Literally 10 times easier, because if they walk in, like the best case scenario is they've seen us on radio for years, on TV for years, they go on our website, then we when they become a lead, we pre-position them. We're sending them texts with links to articles, right, that are about these identity points. And then when you show up and you start whipping out your big faucet, they're like, oh yeah, the big faucet. I already know that you have high quality because you've communicated this to me. But even if none of that has had an influence, because look, there's always going to be the guy that just goes online and fills out a form on some random site, and now they're your lead. Great. In the sales meeting, you can still look. I know you guys do company story. Obviously, that's a big part. It's like you said, it's a big part of it. Here's what I would suggest and recommend: find a way to make it into story time a little bit at least. And then also find a way to make it consistent with the messaging that's going out there, in advertising.
So it sounds like what you're saying is the more pieces of the pyramid that you can use to explain any part of your company story or your product, the more trust and belief the customer will have in that product.
Yeah, but you also have to be careful, right? Because you could overdo it. Okay, the prospect only has so much mental bandwidth to absorb so much information. So here's what I recommend. I've got something called the 5 pillars of identity, which is really just 5 categories of identity. And I'll just list them off real quick. It's your products is the first one. The second one is your workmanship. The third one is bedside manner, how you treat people. Number 4 is your core values. And then number 5 is going to be what I call culture and reputation, which honestly is just kind of a catch-all for everything that didn't fit into the other 4. Okay. So then within each of these 5 pillars, there's specific identity points. Okay. So for instance, products, here's some of the identity points: stronger, more durable, more energy efficient. It looks better, more color selection, more secure. Think windows, right? It's a more secure window. It operates better or easier. Maybe you have a better selection because you've got multiple brands instead of just one brand or something like that. Maybe it's the warranties that go along with this. So these are all, there's about 10 or 12 pretty typical identity points within products. And then you get over to workmanship. It's things like no cutting corners, attention to detail, doing things right the first time. So here's the point, okay? If there's roughly 10 possible identity points in 5 different categories, that's 50. It's too many. It's too many. What I recommend to my clients is within each of these 5 pillars, again, products, workmanship, bedside manner, core values, and culture, find 3 that really map well to your business. And then, so now you've got 15, which is still too many. And then out of those 15, we want to proportionately talk about them in priority of importance. So each company should really have probably 2 to 3 to 4 first tier identity points that you really want your company story to be built around. So here, I'll throw the question back at you guys. When you're talking about company story in a sales presentation, how many different points are you recommending that people go through? Because you can't go through everything.
I don't know if we have a specific number, but I think we typically try to target the same common areas, right? We want to give a little bit of social proof. That's always important. Making sure that we talk about the importance and the quality of the installation process, warranty coverage, and just kind of overall customer service communication. I would say those are probably the main 4 points of company story. Phil, would you agree with that?
Yeah, we also like to show the homeowner the problems with the home improvement industry and things for them to look out for. And then when we show them who we are, we show them why they don't have to worry about those things.
We call that painting the problem, where we'll basically introduce here's why it's important to choose the correct contractor because of all of these bad statistics. Like the home improvement industry ranks 2nd in the nation for customer complaints online, and only 39% of homeowners are actually happy with their install when it's complete.
Right. So these are some reputation type issues.
Exactly. And then so here's all the problems. Now let us show you how we solve those.
So here's what I would recommend. And I'm kind of spitballing this right now, but let's see what we think here, okay? If you take the 5 pillars of identity, they're obviously going to overlap a lot with that company story, clearly. I would recommend finding maybe 2 that really resonate with your company's DNA. Okay, so it's not even necessarily, hey, what's most important to the customer? Because that's like a default obvious thing to say. Well, if you're any kind of company at all, you're not going to lean into stuff that customers don't care about. That's dumb. So you don't have to really think about it that way. You just think, okay, what are we really good at? And then we just need to dig down a little bit and let's find some stories. Let's find some examples. Let's find some comparisons. Okay. You talked about helping them understand that the industry is fraught with, problems. Well, that's where the comparisons come in.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm suggesting. Company story, just like you're doing it now. I have no doubt that you guys are experts at training people on how to do that. Maybe overlay on top of that, finding one or two, one at a minimum, two, maybe even a little bit better, where we can literally pull the faucet out of the bag, or we can pull the giant, by the way, you don't have to have, it doesn't have to be show and tell. Okay. You don't have to have a thing that you drop on the table, but those are two easy to understand examples.
Absolutely. And that has been a part of our product demo for years, has always been trying to show, here are some of the other possibilities on the marketplace. Let me show you why ours is superior. So we're on the same.
Let me touch on one area that maybe is overlooked. You guys tell me if it's overlooked or not. I think it maybe is overlooked. It's the fourth pillar, which is core values. Okay, because core values are kind of touchy-feely, and you say, oh, we're a company you can trust, and we have integrity. Those are platitudes. So you say them and people are like, yeah, okay, whatever. What are you going to tell me? You're going to rip me off? Of course you're not going to tell me that. But one thing that could be very interesting and helpful is if you look at core values, almost every company I've ever talked to says, yeah, one of our core values is integrity. Okay, great. Tell me what that looks like. Remember the pyramid from a minute ago? The identity point is integrity, but now we can look at stories, examples, and comparisons, the second level of the pyramid. What does it look like when you have integrity in your company? How would that manifest? How would somebody notice that? Well, the only way to demonstrate integrity is for something to go wrong and you do the right thing, even though it's harder or more expensive or a bigger pain in the butt. Okay, great. Give me a story. And anytime I ask a company to give me a story when you used integrity to do something that was harder or more expensive and you could have got away with not doing it, they all have stories and they're proud of those stories. You're a roofing company and you say, hey, Mrs. Johnson, I just want you to know, look, we're in the roofing industry. There's a lot of unscrupulous people out there, and we take our reputation very seriously. And I know it's easy for people to say that you can trust us, that we're, have integrity, but let me give you an example. We take every measure possible to protect the outside of your house, your shrubs, your grass, all of that. We do that by doing X, Y, and Z. But I'm going to be honest with you. We had a situation. This was about 2 years ago. It was right down the street here in Taylorsville. And we had a crew that wasn't careful with a flower bed and the flowers got crushed. And we saw this and we thought, oh my gosh, we got to take care of this. Well, it turns out these were really special flowers. We didn't know that. They just look like flowers. What do we know about flowers? And so we went to the homeowner and we said, hey, we need to apologize. We've ruined your flower bed here, but we're going to do whatever it takes to fix it. And she said, look, these kind of flowers, is this expensive? And we went out, we got all those flowers. We hired a gardener, a landscaper to come out and do it. It ended up costing us $1,850 to replace those flowers.
Wow.
Now, here's what I don't want you to take away from that story, is that we're going to ruin your flowers. We're not. But I want you to know this: if anything goes wrong, anything whatsoever, because look, this is construction. Sometimes stuff goes wrong. We're going to bend over backwards. We're going to make it right. Okay, so there's the story, right? What's the identity point? Integrity.
Yes.
But now we have the story.
I've got a hard question.
Yeah.
So you've been doing this for a long time, obviously, and you've seen it all. And you've got your 5 pillars of identity. And within those pillars, you've got all these different things you can choose from. If you were starting a company from scratch today and you got to dictate which items you wanted to build your company around, the things that you think resonate with customers and buyers today the most, what do you think those handful, 3, 4 of those items would be?
Okay. Under the topic of bedside manner, I would always choose no sales pressure.
Okay.
Because it has an outsized advantage over other identity points. And the reason is because it's useful on the front end during pre-positioning. And so I'm going to send a text message when the appointment's set that has an article that's on the blog that says, this is, did you know that most, no offense, Phil and TJ, did you know that most roofing companies send their their salespeople to week-long sales boot camps to train them on compliance tactics. And then it'll talk about, hey, here's how this is what they do. This is how they come in. It's high pressure. Here's what we do. We're going to show you the product. We're going to give you a quote. We're going to stand back. We're going to say, would you like to do business? If so, we'd be honored to have you as a client. If not, we'll part as friends. Okay. You guys are familiar with that kind of language.
Yeah.
But I would do this on the front end. I would say that on the confirmation call, on the appointment set call. I would send it in text messages. And then as soon as the salesperson shows up, here's what I would do. I would have something called a no tricks, no pressure sales agreement. And it would be signed. It would be a list of 6 to 10 things that my sales reps promise that would be signed by the owner of the company, the sales manager, and the salesperson. And it would say things like, it would start easy. I promise I will respect your home, parking places, etc. Number 2, I'm going to do my best to show you all of the different options, give you the best choices. And then at the bottom, like the 6th or 7th point, it would say, I'm going to ask you for the sale, but if it's not a good time or it's not the right fit, I'm going to respect your decision and we'll part as friends. So here's what I'm doing. I'm making this tangible. So that's number 1, bedside manner, no pricing games. Number 2, if I was a window company, you know what I'd lean heavy into? I'd lean heavy into a glass breakage warranty. And the reason is because if you start talking about your great 50-year or lifetime warranty on your window, nobody understands what can go wrong with the window. They know they're replacing theirs because they're old and crappy, but they're just old and crappy because things get old and crappy after a while. It's not really the window's fault. It's just old and crappy's fault. Or maybe they fog. But when you say, hey, I don't know if you know this, but one of the things we do over here at XYZ Windows is we have a glass breakage warranty. If that thing ever breaks for any reason, anytime, your kid throws a baseball through it, your wife is ticked and she throws a plate at you and misses and it goes through the window, we're going to come over, no trip charge, no deductible, no time limit. We're going to replace that sucker for free. And they go, I can imagine that happening.
Yep.
So that's for specific, obviously, to window companies. I'm not a huge proponent. That's not true. I'm not. Promoting warranties doesn't make that much difference to most people. But if you bring it alive like that, again, we're telling the story. Notice how the story is baked into that whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because where TJ and I worked, our window had a like we covered any glass damage. We also covered ripped screens. And when we would tell a homeowner, if the cat gets up in the window and rips the screen, just call us. We'll come out and replace it at no charge. People were shocked that, and if you think about what can go wrong with a window, the cheapest thing to repair is a ripped screen.
Yep.
However, the impact that had on the homeowner
Huge.
was much more than your argon leaked out or your spacer was no longer working. But that had the biggest impact, and it was the cheapest repair.
Yeah, you know what I would do? I would take it. I love that, by the way, Phil. That's awesome. It's just an extension of what we talked about with the glass.
Yeah.
I would take it a step further, and I would put a little sticker or something on every window that has your company name, your phone number, and your URL. And I would tell them, I would say, hey, you see this little sticker here? We put that there so when this window breaks and your son throws a baseball through it or whatever happens to it, or your cat gets up here and rips the screen, we actually want you to call us. Other companies will talk about maybe it's a competitive environment that they have this warranty, but what they're really hoping is that you just forget who they are, and that when it happens, 3 years from now, you don't even know who to call, so you just pay to get it done. See that sticker there? That'll be there for the next how long are you going to be here? It'll be here that long. Call us. So those are just a couple of ideas, but the reality is, okay, so you asked the question the right way, TJ. You said, if you were starting a new company, what would you do? If you're not starting a new company, which is ostensibly most of the listeners, just look at what you do and where you really excel and what your DNA really thrives at doing, and lean into that.
Excellent.
That's awesome. So you talk a little bit about power, precision, and passion. How do we incorporate that more into our sales presentations?
I think the easiest way to do it is to, okay, so you're seeing we're kind of layering this conversation and we're building on it as it goes. So if you take the 5 pillars of identity and then you identify some of those pillars, the next thing on that pyramid, make sure everybody's straight here. We got pillars and we got a pyramid. They're related, but they're different. Okay. So we take the pillar and we put them at the bottom of the pyramid. Those are the identity points. So here's the answer to your question. It's those stories. I think the stories is going to be the easiest way that's reliably trainable for salespeople to really integrate this identity. Okay, because you're going to have a company story, and there's going to be, you know, if you're using Engage or something like that, you're going to have a slide that has the company story points. But if you could have stories that you, I don't know if you like this word or not, but force your salespeople to memorize and then practice telling the story, and then use, you know, something like Zero or Arilla to make sure they're doing it, and then have this story, those 1 or 2 or 3 stories will make a massive impact. I cannot emphasize enough how powerful storytelling is. I get people tell me all the time, they say, Rich, you're one of the best public speakers we've ever heard. And it sounds like I'm bragging right now, but I'm actually not. I'm actually exposing myself. I'm actually just good at telling stories. And I can take almost anything and turn it into a story. So I get up on a stage or on a podcast and I say, oh, here, let me tell a story. I don't even say, I don't introduce it by saying, let me tell a story. I just started with the story, and people just get sucked into the story.
Yeah. When I watched your webinar you did earlier this year in March and, or April, I think it was, and you were telling the story about the hotel with the shower head. You were telling that in such a way that I was sitting there visualizing you, your family, the hotel, you going into the bathroom, you being tempted to jump in the shower or not. And all I kept thinking when you told that story was, this should be part of a sitcom. Like, this is an episode of a sitcom. Is Rich taking his family on vacation, finding a hotel that's completely wrapped around a special shower head, and Rich finally gets in the bathroom to see it and decides to take his clothes off, jump in and take his shower while his family's inside the room going nuts, and how much he enjoyed the shower head. So
yeah, and the detail people need is it's 6 kids that were aged 6 months to 12 years at the time.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal story, and it should be it would be a great episode of a sitcom.
Yeah, but hey, let's dissect that for a minute. 2 things. Thing number 1, that was 6 months ago, and you still remember that story with that much detail. That's the power of the story. Okay, now that story was wrapped into a principle that I wanted them to understand, and in that particular story, my point was, you got to point at the shower head if you want people to notice it. So in marketing, we got to point at stuff. This whole conversation is what we're talking about. You got to point at the things you want people to notice. If you want them to notice that you have high quality, you got to pull out the freaking, you know, faucet and drop it. So we got faucets and showers. We got all kinds of things going on. So number 1 is, that was a powerful story and people remember it. And I honestly, I get people come up to me all the time. Oh, that shower head story. I got another story that's famous called Wall Drug. It was actually part of that same trip. I have people say, I saw you speak 20 years ago and I remember Wall Drug. Okay. So that's number 1. Is you knowing that story is proof that this concept is powerful. Number 2, what if you worked with your clients in your business, or if you're listening to this as a contractor, what if you looked at your company and said, okay, we're going to take this identity thing serious. We're going to find these stories. And what if you had a couple of keystone stories that your salespeople always told every time in the house? Because let me tell you something. So I've been a speaker for a long time. 25 years I've been in front of audiences speaking. And about 4 years ago, I watched this little video on YouTube. It came up as an ad. It wasn't even a video I was watching. It was on Facebook or something. And the guy says, hey, here's how you start a speech. And he says, always start with a story. And he says, here's how most people start a speech. And most people start a speech by saying, oh, thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled and honored to be here at this event. And my name is Rich Harshaw and my company is this and I do this. Okay, well, let's start the slideshow or whatever. And when I heard that, I was like, oh man, that obviously makes so much sense. So I started integrating stories at the beginning of every speech I ever give now. It, like the one that you're talking about, Phil, that was my opener in that webinar. I didn't say a word before I started talking about being on a road trip. I went to Holiday Inn Express. You don't even know who I am when I'm telling that story,
Right.
Assuming you've never seen me before. What if you had a story like that? Obviously, you got to go into the house. You got to get warmed up. You can't just open the door and start telling a story. That's weird. But when it's time to start the selling, you said, hey, let me help you understand something. And I don't know how that gets executed exactly.
Well, I tell you, it's funny that you say that, and Phil can attest to this. I actually think, without knowing that was the right thing to do, that was something that I did. That's really what I built my success on my entire career in sales, was I had the same stories that I would tell at the same points in my presentation, every single house, every
Give me
time.
an example of one of the stories. You don't even necessarily have to tell the whole story, but what was the story and what was the point you were making?
Sure. Yeah. So when talking about price conditioning, I would bring up TV shows like Love It or Listed and Catch a Contractor, some of the different shows that are out there, right? And I talk about how they're entertaining shows, but at the end of the day, every episode's the same. They get halfway into the middle of the install, there's some crazy unforeseen problem, and they go back to the homeowner and they say, hey, turns out we need a bunch more money. We either need more money from you to do this, or we can't do, A,
It never
because
fits
now we
the
need
budget.
Yeah, never. Every single time, right? And the comparison, the idea there is we start talking about how that's what happens in construction. Like, even though that is a TV show, that process is very real. And it happens to homeowners every day, where they commit to a certain price, but by the time the job's actually done, that price is much, much higher. So it's kind of teeing up the idea that just because someone gives you a quote, that's one price and it might seem lower, doesn't mean that that's the final price and what it really is going to be by the time the job's completed.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What you were telling that story, I thought of this. And Phil, you said this a minute ago. I want to point something out that is super crucial in this. Phil, you said when I was telling the story about the Holiday Inn Express and the shower head, you said, and I'm paraphrasing you, I was imagining what that looked like in my head. And that right there is the key to all of this. Because when you tell the story, they're going to paint that mental picture inside on the canvas that's in their brain, using things that are familiar to them, using the hotels that they've seen. And so it's going to be very, very realistic, and it's going to grab them. This is one of the reasons I love radio advertising so much. People are like, oh, you can't see it. I don't need people to see anything. I can tell the story, and I can paint a picture that's more specific to them without, here's what I hate. Hey, look at our kitchen. Here's another kitchen. Then they're like, I don't really like that kitchen. I'd rather describe the beautiful kitchen and let them fill it in.
Yep. Well, when people talk about how much you remember and how much you recall, and they talk about how dramatic it goes up from what you hear to what you see to what you experience. When you were telling that story, I was able to hear it, see it, and experience it. And this will give you an example of how strong of a story it was when it comes to recall. There were 3 other things about that bathroom when you noticed when you went into that bathroom. You noticed the thickness of the towels, you noticed the curved shower rod, and you noticed the individual soaps and shampoos that they had available for their customers. And I can see it right now in my mind. I can sit there, I can see the towels, I see the shower rod. So the more and the more we can make those stories specific to somebody that we've done work with. So now, this is Mr. and Mrs. Jones that live 2 streets over to you. They were in a similar situation as you. The storytelling is the key to the whole process when it comes to getting them to buy in and believe and trust, in my opinion.
Yeah, you brought up another good point there, which is the level of detail matters. The more detail, the more they can make it their own.
Yep.
So TJ, like in that story you tell, I don't want to suggest that you didn't tell it brilliantly, because that sounds really good. You could actually lead the witness a little bit, right? Hey, have you ever seen those shows on TV where they come in and remodel? Oh yeah, I have. Like, what are some that you like? Oh, Love It or Listed, whatever it is.
Property Brothers.
Property Brothers. What happens every single time in those shows when they get about halfway through the remodel? What happens? Maybe they don't know. Maybe they need a little prompt. Do they have enough budget? Oh no, man. They always, yeah.
Right.
And then you say, yeah, I saw this one episode where they had quoted it out at $27,000 and it ended up being 130.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen any shows like that? Yeah. Have you ever heard anybody that had an experience like that? Now they're filling in all their own little details.
Yep. That's perfect.
That's
Last question or two, and then we'll let you go. Do you have any advice on how we can leverage identity after our sales presentation is complete while we're laying down price and asking for the order? Is there a way that you have in mind that could benefit that process?
So, Phil, you'll probably notice this from that story about the shower head. This is an old comedy trick. I studied stand-up comedy for a little bit while I was in college. I never really pursued it, but I studied it and I've listened to a lot. They have what's called the callback. Do you know what that means?
Yeah.
So the comedian will tell the story and it'll be funny all by itself. And then later on in his routine, 10 minutes later, 20, 30 minutes later, he'll tell another joke and he'll pull that first joke into that joke. Okay. So it's called a callback. Mm-hmm. And it's really a brilliant way to do comedy. It's the audience loves it because they're in on the joke. They already know that other story. So, to answer your question, you have your identity points, you find the stories, train your folks on telling the stories, and now you're going to call back. So I know this, I don't know what you guys call it. You have specific words and maybe you can share those with me right now, but you get towards the end and you're trying to, what is it, like re-establish the value at the end before you go into the close? What do you call that? Yeah,
we typically call it like a project recap.
Yeah. Okay. A project recap. So then you can go back in and you can say, this is how the project looks. Here's, some of the details. Hey, just want to make sure that we're on the same page here. Do you remember what we talked about with the faucet? You remember that? Of course, it's sitting right there. I just want you to know, I want you to be super clear. This is the highest quality materials. Now you can do a trial close, right? Now, not everybody wants the highest quality material. Some people are more on a budget. How do you feel about that? What is your thought on that? Well, it depends on how much it costs, right? It depends on the difference in price. Okay, are you more of a 10-pound kind of a person or a pound and a half kind of person? Because if you're a pound and a half kind of person, totally awesome. We're probably not the right company for you, though. Because honestly, we don't even make that available. We can't attach our name to that kind of quality. So it's the callback.
Yep, and you're also incorporating the takeaway there too, of like, hey, we might not be the right company for you, and then it becomes, oh no, I like that stuff too. I want to be involved.
Yeah, and then you could say, hey, obviously, as we talked about earlier, it's not just the faucet, it's also the backer boards, it's also the grout. Remember, we do, the acrylic grout versus the sand-based grout, and this and this and this, whatever the things are.
Right. Perfect.
So it's a callback. I think the callback's the answer to your question.
There you go. Excellent. Well, can you tell us maybe a little bit about where we can find your book that you said is not a bestseller, but it's a really good book?
Well, I guess it depends on what list you're talking about. It's the best-selling book I've ever written.
Yep.
Out of the 3 I've written, it's called Unlocking Unlimited Lead Flow. It's on Amazon. It's specifically written to this industry, home remodelers and home services companies. Also, I have a podcast called Level 10 Contractor Daily Podcast. Keyword in that is daily podcast. It's all things marketing. I've been doing it for 5 years now. We're over 1,800 episodes. So here's what I would say about that. Any topic that has anything to do with any kind of marketing, there's an episode that covers that. I've had Tony on at least twice, maybe 3 times. I can't remember. It's been 5 years since we've been doing it. Just as an example. In fact, I had Tony on earlier this year talking about how to sell in retail stores. Phenomenal episode. It was great. Go listen to it. It's in there. So there's a resource for you. Also, of course, my website, level10contractor.com. We offer free website audits. If you think your website's doing awesome, I don't know, go fill out the form. Let us take a look at it. We'll let you know if it's room for improvement. Most companies are getting very, very few organic leads. Organics, like people went to Google and searched for kitchens in your area and you're not coming up. You should be getting minimum 50 organic leads a month. 100 is more likely, and hardly anybody is. So we can help you with that. That's what we do. Thanks for having me on today, guys.
Well, thank you very much.
Hey, we appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll do some more stuff together in the future, and would love to, as TJ and I work with a lot of companies on helping them create their sales presentations and methodologies, it'd be nice to incorporate more identity and a lot of these practices into the presentation. So thank you for the education, and thank you for the time today.
Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for having me on the podcast, and look forward to talking to you again in the future. I'm sure we'll see you at an event here and there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
And if you or your business is in need of training, recruiting, process development, or consulting, you can contact us here at Tony Hody Training and Consulting by visiting tonyhody.com. Click the contact tab and enter your information for a free consultation to see how we can help you grow your business. Tony Hody Training and Consulting, teaching ordinary people how to do extraordinary things.